I know it's a bit late in the season to start my garden, but since we moved, I've been having a hard time with all sorts of animals coming and eating my crops. The solution, I hope, is this elevated raised garden bed. It comes with a cover system that should keep out the animals and also many of the bugs. And yes, the cover will also keep out the pollinators, so you have to be mindful of that. I'm going to start off this bed with an herb garden, and let's see what happens. Basil is a self-pollinator in any case, and the herb parts that are used for culinary purposes are generally the leaves and stems, so pollination is not necessary for harvesting those parts, and that's why I'm starting with an herb garden. Putting this together wasn't hard, and I did it myself. It probably would have been easier with two people. The weather was hot, so I had to take frequent water breaks, and I got two beds, so I put them both together at the same time. Here you can see all the pieces laid out ready for me to put them together. This is for two 8-foot beds, and I really like the green color. It blends in nicely with the natural greenery from the grass and trees. To start, I read through the instruction booklet, and I also watched a video on how to assemble this, and still I made some mistakes along the way. The various screws and bolts came in labeled baggies, so it wasn't hard to figure out which screws to use. Just to be a little organized, I laid them all out, F1 through F5, and some zip ties, and a couple of tools, but you do need to provide your own Phillips head screwdriver. Okay, let's get started by assembling the legs to the side panels. Make sure to pay attention to which side is up. You can see the diagram points to having the hole facing up, so make sure you follow all the instructions. Otherwise, you'll have to take it apart and make it right. So save yourself some grief and pay attention to the diagrams. And here you can see the two side panels are done, and actually that was easy. The arrow is pointing up, and you're only supposed to fasten the top two screws and leave the third bottom screw for later. Of course, I had to assemble 4 side panels, not 2, since I'm assembling 2 beds side by side. I figure it's easier to do it step by step for 2 than to completely assemble one and then the other separately. Here's a closer look of how these parts come together. Next, it says to install H2 and H3, and H2 had a label with arrows on the metal, so it was easy to figure that one out. H3 didn't have a label, so I had to guess which piece was H3. Make sure you install H2 according to the diagram with everything pointing in the right direction. And then this is H3, and it gets installed like this. For both end panels, do the same thing, and of course I had to do this 4 times since I'm assembling 2 beds. This is what it looks like so far. Here's a closer look. You can see the bottom holes are now screwed to the H2 panel that I just put in. By the way, the bottom row of screws, F1, doesn't get an F2 cap on them like the top 2 rows of screws. I made that mistake and then realized later I was running out of F2 caps because I used them all up on the 3rd row of screws. Here you can see the 4 panels all lined up but upside down. At this point, it's going to be easier to work upside down than right side up. The next step is to assemble the square frame. Again, notice the instructions have diagrams of where the holes should be facing when you screw this together, so pay attention to the drawings. That is really helpful, better than words. The 2 bracket-shaped pieces fit into each other nicely like this, and then they get screwed together with 4 of the F4 screws. And now that I have both of them done, the next step is to screw them into the legs that go in the middle of the bed. They're labeled as P4 in the instruction booklet, and it's pretty obvious which pieces they are. They are obviously legs since they have holes here for the wheels to go on, if you got wheels. So the square bracket gets screwed onto the P4 legs with the 2 holes facing towards the shorter part of the legs where the wheel holes are. The next step is to assemble the longer side of the bed, labeled H4, and that goes on the bottom near the legs, which is why I'm assembling this upside down, It's much easier than bending over. Make sure the side with the holes on H4 is facing the top of the bed, which in this case is upside down. This is the way it should look. Next are the corrugated panel sides. Those are the longer 8-foot pieces. Here's what it should look like. Next is the H1 piece, and again, these were not labeled with stickers to make things easier, so I had to guess which was H1, but it wasn't rocket science. Since it was for the longer side of the bed, it was pretty obvious. Still, it would be nice to have everything labeled, not just a few of the pieces. Here's how it looks on the bed. Again, make sure everything is oriented properly. Almost done. Now for the bottom boards, there are 3 of them labeled B1, B2, and B3, and make sure you put the right ones in the right place. They overlap onto each other, and once they fit snugly together, they're screwed down for good measure. Thankfully, these boards were labeled. It would have been hard to figure out which was which otherwise. The B1 boards go down first. There are 4 of those, 1 for each end of the bed and 2 in the middle. Next are the B2 boards. There are 2 of those, and they go next to the middle B1 boards. Make sure to overlap the lip so they're snug. And last are the B3 boards. Again, just 2 of those, and they go between B1 and B2. Once they're laid down and overlapping, you need to screw them in along the sides and the ends. That's going to take 20 F3 screws, and maybe having an electric screwdriver would have been helpful here. And here you can see the boards all laid out and screwed down. The next step is to attach the casters or wheels if you got them. This bed will be very heavy to move without wheels, so it's a good investment if you expect to move your bed around, say from sun to shade or just to work on planting and harvesting. It's really nice to have the wheels. For this bed, there are 6 wheels, 3 are regular wheels, and 3 have locking mechanisms, so you need to install them in a staggered way like the picture shows, so that the locking mechanism is at each end and in the middle. They work really well. It's very smooth to roll once the wheels are on. Here you can see all the wheels on the 2 beds, and at this point it's time to flip the bed over to work from the top down. Here is where you need a second person to help you do that, unless you're Iron Man. Now that the bed is upright, the bottom racks go on. That's pretty easy. They just go on. And then you put the zip ties to tie them together. And here they are, all tied together. The last thing to do, yay, is to put on the black safety edging. It just goes on all around the top, and then when you get to the end, you need to snip off a small piece and then fit it back down so that the 2 ends meet. Here you can see I'm putting the edging on with one hand because the other hand is holding the camera, and even with one hand, it's very easy. And here I got to the end, and I need to snip and then connect the 2 ends. There we go. Easy peasy. These beds are 2 feet by 8 feet, and I filled the bottom half with old soil from my old grow bags that I grew in last summer, and also I filled it with raised bed gardening soil. This is what I bought and had delivered for $2.99. That beats the gas and the effort of picking it up myself. This brand is organic, and I've used it before with great results. They have a guide here to approximate how many bags of soil you need. Each bag is 2 cubic feet. To calculate the amount needed, the Home Depot site has a soil calculator, and I put 8 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 12 inches deep, which is 16 square feet, and the calculator says I need 9 cubic feet of soil to cover 18 square feet, so they're giving me a little more than I need. I really only need half that amount since I filled the bed halfway up with old soil, but I have 2 beds, and I ended up ordering 6 bags and filled the beds to about 2 inches below the top rim. Here you can see my 2 beds are filled with soil and ready for planting. After that, I'm going to put up this trellis so that the animals don't eat my crops, and I have something to harvest in the end. Since it's late in the season, I'm going to plant quick-growing crops, and then as the weather turns cooler, I'm going to plant lettuce, and once the season is over, I'm going to get some garlic bulbs and plant them for a spring harvest. You can probably tell I'm super excited to finally be able to grow on my deck without animals hassling the fruits of my labor. Happy planting, everyone, and thanks for watching. Bye.